I'm an optimist. I believe that if we withdraw our forces from Iraq, we refocus our foreign policy on what our objectives should be. One, threat of international terrorism. I think it's real. Nuclear proliferation, a weapon of mass destruction that would threaten our cities carried by a terrorist. And then third, the need to become energy independent and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Those are our priorities, and our diversion and the $450 billion that we spend in Iraq is causing us to shift away from the true priorities that this country needs to meet in our foreign policy and national security.
All right. It's become commonplace at these debates that you've been a part of to ask about whether you would have voted for the Iraq War had you been in the Senate and been privy to the information that the senators running against you were privy to. What do you say? You were not part of the Senate. You did not have to cast a vote. Would you have voted, knowing what they knew at the time, would you have voted for the war?
If I'd gotten intelligence that said there were weapons of mass destruction, and a president would say there was a link to Al-Qaeda, that's persuasive. But right before the vote, I was urging more diplomacy. I was very unhappy that they weren't going to the United Nations for a second time. But the reality is that today, this has been a major disastrous military policy disaster. It's just every conceivable mistake has been made. So when you do that, you shift gears. You still protect our interests. It's not an issue of cutting and run. It's an issue of protecting our interests and protecting our troops. Our kids are dying out there. They're dying. The last 3 months were the bloodiest, and it's continuing, and they've become targets.
The Maliki government has not held up its end by anybody's measure, have they?
No, I mean, look at the last General Accounting Office report, GAO report. Only 3 out of the 14 benchmarks were met. Only 3 out of 14. That's a terrible percentage. They have failed, and we don't lean on them. And then you have Maliki going to Iran and talking to the Iranians.
Wouldn't it be in the interest of the president or supporters of the war to find a better government in Iraq? They seem to be tolerating quite a bit from the ineptitude of Maliki.
They've had an election, and he won. They've had 3 elections. That one, I'll concede that they have democratic institutions. But Iraq, Evan, is not powerless. They have 150 billion reserves of oil. They have 330,000 security forces. So all these people that say, if the U.S. leaves, it's the end of the world. I mean, this is a strong country. Yeah, divided, enormously pained by this war, suffering, but I believe with other support, a political framework, Iraq can survive, and we can preserve our interest, and we can move on. I would still leave some of our forces in Kuwait in case of an international terrorist situation. Kuwait, where we are needed. We need to put some of our forces in Afghanistan. But I'd put that $450 billion back into America in healthcare, education, scholarships, universal health care, to spend on our people, our own infrastructure, our grid, our bridges, our highways, commuter rail, the importance of investing in human resources in our own people and training, and getting these kids out of these ghettos with no hope and substance abuse.